Distinguished colleagues, before us is Professor Ali Pate. Prof, you were long awaited. We've seen your resume, so we'd like you to give us a summarized version of your resume and add anything that you think you would like the Nigerian public and this hallowed chamber to know about you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Your Excellency, the President of the Senate, Your Excellency, the Deputy Senate President, leadership of the Senate, distinguished senators in these hallowed chambers. If I may call out my own distinguished senators from Bauchi State, my brothers, distinguished Senator Shehu Buba, Senator Abdul Ningi, and Senator Good afternoon. It is with humility that I stand before you this afternoon as a nominee to be minister in the Federal Executive Council. My name is Muhammad Ali Pate, and I was born on September 6, 1968. I'm very grateful that His Excellency, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, graciously invited me and nominated me to be considered by this chamber for confirmation. It's a high honor. And 73, I went on to Barrier College, Zaria from 1979 to 1984. In 1984, I went to Ahmadu Bello University to do my advanced levels and then went on to medical school. I graduated from Ahmadu Bello University with my medical doctor degrees in 1990. After housemanship service, I went back to the Ahmadu Bello University Teaching Hospital as an assistant lecturer. I was very honored to have been recruited to work for the British Medical Research Council laboratories in the Gambia, where I started my international health career in February 1993. So it's 30 years now in international public health career. With the Medical Research Council, we did work on malaria, on malnutrition, on many other childhood diseases in those days. I went on to the United States to specialize in internal medicine and subsequently subspecialized in infectious diseases and was board certified by the American Board of Internal Medicine and Infectious Diseases as a physician who was also licensed in the United States. I studied health systems and pivoted to the World Bank as a development professional in 2000. At the World Bank, as a young professional at the World Bank and public health specialist, I worked in Eastern and Southern Africa on health reforms, HIV/AIDS, several countries in the region. I also worked in the District of Columbia in their own health reforms in the United States, seconded by the World Bank. I moved on to be senior health specialist and Human Development Sector Coordinator in the East Asia and Pacific region of the World Bank, where I was responsible for Papua New Guinea, Timor-Leste, Solomon Island, and many Pacific Island countries, based in Sydney, but covering the region. In 2008, I was Acting Sector Manager for Health and Nutrition and Population in the East Asia Pacific, when the late President Umar Musa Yar'Adua, God bless his soul, invited me to come home and serve. I did not hesitate to come back and serve. I came on to be the Chief Executive of the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency. And that was the beginning of a 5-year journey in the federal government. After 3 years, I was asked by His Excellency President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan to serve in his government, which I did. And in the 5 years that I served in government, we contributed, along with several faces that I see here and outside in this country, important things for this country. Polio was a major challenge globally, and Nigeria was at the heart of it. With all of you, with several other state governors, we were able to deal with decisively. We improved immunization. We developed the midwifery service scheme, developed a community health worker program, started to revitalize primary health care. And President Jonathan asked me to be his nominee as the Minister of State in the Federal Ministry of Health. And this hallowed chambers confirmed me in July of 2011. I served until 2013, when I completed all that I had promised my president at that time, and moved on to teach comparative health systems at the Duke University Global Health Institute in Durham, North Carolina in 2013. I did that for 2 years until I became the Chief Executive Officer of Big Win Philanthropy, which is a UK and US-based philanthropy that was helping leaders in the continent of Africa who were interested in investing in human capital, who were interested in investing for the long-term growth of their countries. Following that stint of work, in July 2019, I was honored that the Harvard University assessed me and endowed a chair, the Julio Frank Chair Professorship in the Practice of Public Health Leadership in Boston, and took the unprecedented step of seconding me to serve as the Global Director for Health, Nutrition and Population at the World Bank. I was Director of the Global Financing Facility through the period of the initial stages of the COVID-19 pandemic, and we contributed to several countries. Most recently, I was elected member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and in fact, I was due to start my role as Chief Executive Officer of the Global Alliance for Vaccines Initiative in Geneva, Switzerland, tomorrow, August 3rd. His Excellency, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, I think has inspired this country. I think there's an opportunity to renew hope, to heal the country, to unite it, and to inspire it. When asked to come and contribute in my own country, I accepted, and I'm very grateful that you are giving me this privilege of standing before you. As a person, I've been married for the last 28 years to a wonderful woman who has been very tolerant of me, and we have 6 children, 4 girls and 2 boys. And the community that I come from has been very gracious in naming me the Chigari of Misau, which is my traditional title in my own village, and the Enya of Ibi in Taraba State, in addition to other community leadership roles that I have had. I have also supported an organization that is a grassroots-based organization in this country for the last 8 years. It's operating in 19 states and the Federal Capital Territory, and it works with frontline community leaders. We've got 70,000 of them that have been trained through this organization that I have been supporting over time. So, Your Excellency, Mr. President, I'm here, humbly, standing before you, and ready to answer any questions that may be raised by members of this chamber. Thank you very much.
Distinguished Senator Abdul Ningi, on behalf of the good people of Bauchi State.
Mr. President, my name is Abdul Ningi, and I represent Bauchi Central, Bauchi State, and the nominee is my constituent. Mr. President, I have known the nominee all his life. I schooled in Misau, where he comes from, and his father was actually the reason why I studied in ABU Zaria. And his uncle Wakila Audu is a very close associate of myself. Mr. President, here you have one of our very best, not only in Bauchi State, but in Nigeria. This is standing before you, is a global personality. We used to call him the star of our time. You have listened to him, and you have also perused through some of his resume. And Mr. President, let me, from the onset again, congratulate him and thank in abundance President Bola Tinubu for appointing people like him. Being a global player, he is not taking away from our nation. Rather, he's bringing in, just as he brought in a lot of goodies when he was the Minister of Health. Mr. President, you recall, as soon as the Senate read out the list of ministerial appointees, and if you have been watching the social media and the electronic media, from Arise to TVC to NTA to AIT to channels, every participant that comes before this channel names him as a minister to watch out for. That is because of his pedigree. I have no doubt Professor Pate has come to add value to our nation. Mr. President, even though you say I should speak for Bauchi, I will crave the indulgence of my colleagues and of course the leave of the Senate President to allow my two colleagues to say a word or two, particularly Dr. Kaila, who happens also to be a medical personnel and also served under the professor. Distinguished senators, here you have a brother, somebody that can be relied upon to deliver democratic dividends, most especially in health. We are backward, but his dream all the time is to see that Nigeria belongs to the Community of Nations that will one day serve all our health requirements here, not to travel outside. I'm sure with Professor Pate given the opportunity in the next 4 years, you begin to see Nigerians look inwards rather than outwards for the health requirement. Gentlemen, Professor Ali Fatih for you. Thank you.
Dr. Kaila.
Mr. President, my name is Dr. Samaila Dahua Kaila. Kachallan Katagum is my title. I'm a medical doctor, as my brother said. Actually, I'm a newcomer to the legislature. And when I came, I actually promised myself that I am going to at least stay for 2 or 3 months without saying anything in this chamber, just learning. But of course, until if the president called me to do so. Thank God he didn't. But today I have to break my silence and at least talk about Professor Pate. To be honest, in fact, I am in this chamber thanks to Professor Pate. I was working in Kano when Professor Pate called me and he said he wanted to talk to me. I said, okay. He now advised me to join politics. I was shocked because at that time I actually dreaded politics. But he said, no, join politics and you'll be a good politician. This is about 6 years ago, and a lot has happened. The rest is history. Today, I'm a senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and Professor Pate is here standing to be confirmed by one of his boys. The only thing I can say, I thank God. What my brother Abdul Ningi didn't say about Professor Pate is the fact that he's not only a technocrat, he is a grassroots politician. It is very difficult to have this type of combination. But go to Bauchi State, call 3 politicians, Dr. Pate will be one of them. So he is not only a technocrat, he is a politician. I'm not going to talk about him because his resume is here. It's very, very intimidating, especially for us, the medical doctors. But I will only say, for those of us that are going to work with him, interact with him, engage with him for the next 4 years, hopefully, this gentleman is very honest, but he is very, 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 let me call it, thorough, and I put the word here, very passionate about whatever he is doing. So if you are talking to him, whatever he told you, he meant it. He will not tell you what he doesn't mean. I will also crave the indulgence of my colleagues to ask him as many questions as possible, but on health. I'm not going to open the question like my colleague of Ondo said. Because of that, I have a question. I will open the floor with my first question. Before joining Senate, I was the Commissioner of Health in Bauchi State. And one of the things that I found is the heavy, let me call it, overdependence on donations and donors in our health systems, especially the immunization side. We heavily depend on donors. You remove World Health Organization, you remove USAID, you remove Dangote and Bill Belinda Gates Foundation, there will be no immunization in Nigeria. This is a fact. If given the opportunity to serve as Minister of Health, what are you going to do to transition Nigeria from a dependent on donor to a more domestic financing of our childhood immunizations? Bearing in mind that health does not even come under exclusive list of our legislation. In fact, it is not even in the concurrent list. I think it came, if I'm not mistaken, it came in the residual. So there will be a lot of conflict in enacting laws that will be universal or at least nationwide when it comes to health. How do you intend to navigate this confusion in order for us to be more dependent, more reliant on our economy, or more reliant on our local resources for vaccines, vaccination, and even vaccine production? Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
The dismissed Isa Jibril.
Your Excellency, the President of the Senate, my distinguished colleagues, I am Isa Jibril, representing the very good people of Kogi East. First, I want to congratulate the Prof for this nomination, very well deserved. I'm happy that the Prof served under President Yaradua, because the issue that I want to bring up has to do with one of the projects that was initiated by the wife of the president then, but has since remained abandoned. The cancer project along the airport road, Abuja. I know you are very much aware of that project. You know the havoc that cancer has wreaked on so many families in Nigeria, especially within the women fold. Especially among the women fold. Okay? Yeah, among the women fold. So what I'm saying is this. Why has that project been abandoned? That project, so many corporate bodies, including where I was working, as I was an executive director at AfriBank then, and we contributed 2 billion, okay, as part of our corporate social responsibilities to that project. We paid the money, okay, and that project has remained abandoned. I'm also happy that the minister for FCT then, well, just hold it, sir. Just hold it, sir. Hold it, sir. Hold it, sir. Your Excellency, can I continue, please? Hold on, sir. Hold on, sir. Hold on, sir. Yes, I know. The minister for FCT then is seated here. Okay, but what I'm saying is that my organization, my bank, contributed 2 billion to that project. That project has since been abandoned. I don't really know why it has been abandoned. The structures are on the ground. I understand that some of the equipment have been installed, but I want to find out why was the project, abandoned. Okay, that is my question. I'm not saying that he contributed to it, but I feel that that project is a worthwhile project which was initiated by the wife of our late President Yaradua, a very good innovation, and we know the havoc that I said that cancer has wreaked on so many families in this country. Why has that project been abandoned?
Other words. Please read. Use your mic.
Order 55, the senator should confine himself to the issue relevant for discussion. Mr. President, Professor Ali Pate is not responsible for the building and the equipping of the cancer center. It is a non-governmental organization spearheaded by the wife of late President Omar Musa Eladua. And I'm the chairman of the cancer center. And the center has been under construction. We have virtually completed the building. We are looking for money to equip it. So it is not abandoned. It's not abandoned. And this question should not be directed to the nominee. If you permit me, I would want to ask relevant questions, particularly on the healthcare delivery in Nigeria. We all know, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, there is let him rule on your point. Okay. All right.
The point of order is sustained. Now, let me just say something. If we want to talk about healthcare now, I will also have a lot of questions. For instance, I have, under my tenure as the governor, built the best general hospital in West Africa. It is exceedingly fantastic. And I will expect that if given the opportunity as a minister, Prof, you visit Uyo to take a look at that hospital, and also see how we can turn it into a center where people can stop the capital flights in the health sector by going abroad, because we have the best equipment all over the place. Then I want to point out from your CV, between 2011 and 2013, you served as the Minister of State for Health. Am I right? And you couldn't have served as a Minister of Health for Health unless you were screened by the Senate and confirmed by the Senate. Your second journey is welcome. Answer the only question posed to you, and because your screening still stands, if there's anything you've learned new since you resigned as the Minister of Health, mention it to the Senate, and thereafter you take a bow.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, distinguished senators, for these questions. I think this country is blessed, and its future can be bright. The health of its people is one of the most important things for that future to be realized in terms of where we ought to be and where we are today. Unfortunately, there's a gap, and to bridge that gap requires a consensus among all of us, leadership of the President and the Executive, and also the legislature, as well as the subnational units. Now, the question that Dr. Kaila asked is a very important one. How do we manifest the prioritization of health of our people except through the resources that we allocate to it? Financing is the core of it. There's the governance side, there's the financing side. That's how we communicate whether we prioritize it. God forbid, if something were to happen in this for one of us, myself or anyone else, God forbid it, there are conditions that could happen that before we get to where we can get the help, we will be in very serious conditions. So the prioritization of health in Nigeria has been suboptimal. And I'll explain why that is the case and answer Dr. Kaila's question. The total government expenditure on health is about $12 to $14 per person, with huge variation. Out-of-pocket spending is a huge portion of the total health expenditure, about $54 per person. So in Nigeria, much of the spending on health is from families and out-of-pocket. And government puts $12 to $14 per person, which is roughly, if you add it up, about 1% of GDP. How does it compare to other places? Niger, our next door neighbors, have less resources than us, but they allocate more than double what we allocate in terms of their health spending relative to their GDP. That is indication of the prioritization. Same thing with a country like Ghana. Ghana similarly does that. The point that I'm trying to make is that domestic financing represents the prioritization that we give to health, but we are not spending enough, perhaps because the revenue is limited, but even within the limited revenue, there is room to increase the allocation for health. The domestic financing that Dr. Kaila mentioned. Without doing it, inadvertently, we are outsourcing the prioritization of health to external actors. So it's important that we work, not only the federal government, Ministry of Finance, Planning, Health, but also the subnational level and the legislature that appropriates these resources to safeguard the financing of essential things like vaccines. We're having outbreaks of diphtheria, measles, many communicable diseases are entirely preventable, and they can be prevented by simple vaccines that are very cheap, $1 to $2 a dose. It's unfortunate that parts of this country have some of the worst immunization coverages in the world. And immunization is one of the most effective tools of public health. So, Mr. President, I'm pleading that going forward under the renewal agenda of His Excellency, Mr. President, that we prioritize investments in health and investments in the things that can prevent diseases, that can protect our children who are the future of this country. The domestic manufacturing, if I can say, Mr. President. Yes. Yes, yeah, I will. I would say the second point is there's a scope for medical industrialization in this country that we have not attended to. 60 to 70% of our generics, the drugs that we take, are imported from countries that are just like us. There's an economic value chain in that health sector that we have not optimized. Same thing with our devices. Same thing on service delivery. So the health sector is not only a sector that we spend, but there's an economic development agenda that is inherent in health, in addition to the imperative for health security. So putting all those together, the consensus should be to prioritize health and to translate that prioritization in better investments through the budget process. Mr. President, I also have noted the questions on the infrastructure, and I think that's something that we can look at in due course. The question here before me is, how do we prevent doctors moving from Nigeria to other countries? That's a very complicated question. I left this country in 1993. Why did I leave? Has it translated into better value than if I had stayed here? I think we produce health workers, we produce doctors and all kinds of professionals. We need to look at the conditions of service, the circumstances, the compensation, and in a way re-energize the sector around the mission, because no one joins the health sector who is not committed to serving his or her patients. I think we need to renew that compact within the context of health to make it more conducive to retain the health workers that we produce, to deploy them effectively, to train them where needed, and to give them the tools where they can work with those tools to serve our people. That's going to be very important. And I will say the incessant labor disputes within the health sector that sometimes affect service delivery itself is something that can help, if resolved through building of trust between the government and the various professional groups, to reduce the tendency for folks to travel out of the country to other places. For those who travel, there are opportunities also to come back. I'm hoping, Mr. President, that with this move that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has done of convening Nigerians of all stripes to join the team that he's assembled, that will restore confidence and give hope that even folks that are outside the country will consider coming back to see how they can contribute. I made that choice with my eyes very wide open, but this is our country. So for those who have left, I will say next to service to God is service to country. So if the opportunity comes, even those who have left should find ways to contribute, and this country's health system will get better. On Gavi, how can Nigeria benefit more from Gavi and vaccine production? So Gavi, which is the entity that I would have served from tomorrow, is the largest global fund for health. It has $27 billion in terms of the fund it's raised, but also donations. It's based in Geneva, Switzerland, and over the last few years, it's invested at least $1 billion in Nigeria's health. For much of the vaccines that are provided in Nigeria, it is contributing and subsidizing the cost of the vaccines, just as it has for many other countries in the world, and during COVID supported 142 countries. That is the organization that I would have started as CEO tomorrow. Now, the production of vaccines is something that a country ought to decide. India is the pharmacy capital of the world. It didn't happen by accident. Indian government, Indian entrepreneurs, technology scientists, regulatory scientists came together and made that possible. We have a population of 240 million. If we start on the path of medical industrialization and say simple things like generics, 70% of them are imported, that we want to produce them here. How can we have the policy, regulatory, and financing structure so that we encourage that domestic production? 90% or more of our medical devices are imported. How can we organize our economic sector in health so that we produce it here, we create jobs, we return our foreign. If we start on that path and build our regulatory capacity based on what entities like NAFDAC are doing, it is very possible that we can move fast in the arena of other biologicals. Vaccines are one. There are countries in the continent that are planning to produce vaccines, Rwanda, Senegal. They are producing vaccines. If we don't act, it's to produce to sell to us. And we can go beyond the vaccines that are already in place, the cheaper vaccines, and go towards more advanced vaccines like cancer vaccines. Those are arenas that we can look forward, given the size of our economy, given the resources that God has imbued this country, and the leadership of our president, to see how we can invest on that path so that we will be more secure in the supplies that we get for our health and get the economic dividend from that investment. Mr. President, I will answer the question on cancer a bit from another angle. The infrastructural bit, cancer, we lose about 600,000 people from non-communicable diseases. We talk about infectious diseases, which are vaccine preventable. There are many other diseases that are non-communicable. Cancers are one of them, hypertension, diabetes, stroke, and others. Now, there are vaccines that can prevent some types of cancer. The hepatitis B vaccine. The hepatitis vaccines can prevent cancer. In effect, they prevent an infection that can cause cancer. The human papillomavirus vaccine for adults and girls prevents a viral infection that can lead to cancer, cervical cancer in women. And we have a large burden of cervical cancer, particularly in this country, and our women bear the brunt of it. Dealing with cancer, there's a preventive side, in addition to screening, but also the vaccination. There is a vaccine which is available in most other countries. And thankfully, in the next few months, Nigeria will get ready. We'll have the human papillomavirus vaccine, and Gavi is supporting that in this country. It's my hope that the consensus, including with the legislature, would educate our population to understand the value of preventing a disease before it happens, a disease that is lethal, like cervical cancer, and that once it's available, it's subsidized, that in fact it can be, just like several other vaccines. But in the future, with the technology of vaccine production, the mRNA vaccines, cancer vaccines will become a reality. And I am pleased to say, Mr. President, that we're confident that under the leadership of the President, Nigeria will be a hub for health, not only for our country, but also on the continent. Because what happens here has ramifications. We can supply our neighbors. We can supply the rest of the continent as well. So the time is getting there when development, at least in health, we need to own it. We should be responsible for the health of our people. We should invest in that direction, and we should not outsource it, because the more we outsource it to donors from outside with grant financing, they can then influence our priorities. But the more we invest with our domestic resources, then we can control the priorities that fit with our people. And if we stick to the idea that government is about service and the people are the reason why government exists, then prioritizing the health of the population is going to be one of the most important things that we should all be doing. Because as it is, we have one of the lowest life expectancies. We are 2.4% of the world's population, almost a quarter of global maternal mortality, a fifth of child mortality, and the largest number of unimmunized children in the world. This is not a statistic that is hidden, it's out there, and we have what it takes to use what we have and spend it better and make sure that, in fact, we address this most basic thing to prevent diseases that can be prevented and to produce health. And there will be benefit because the trust of the population will be enhanced if the minimum they are able to get something that could help them. The human capital of this country can be preserved because health is not only a byproduct of development. It can be a consequence of development. If you have a healthy population, they will be more productive. And if you are more productive, you can invest more in health. And there's an economic imperative. Of course, there's the political dividend that Mr. President has also alluded to. So I would, Mr. President, stop here and happy to answer any additional question there may be. There's one question of preparedness. I think it's a very important one.
On the microphone.
The question is on preparedness against outbreaks. And I think it's a very important one. Health security is part of national security. And let me explain. I was leading the World Bank's global practice on health when COVID hit. We saw a small virus came from Wuhan, affected just a tiny fraction of the world's population, an infectious disease, but it grounded the world's economy. Every country was affected, even those who were not infected. So from a health issue, you have an economic catastrophe that many countries are still struggling to recover. We had seen that with Ebola. So there's a direct linkage between health security and economic security and national security. But how do we prepare? And in the era of risks, climate, flooding, displacements, conflicts, migration, how do we prepare? We are not as prepared. And there's a lesson that we should learn from the last couple of years, that when the chips are down, the world will take care of itself, and we have to take care of ourselves. So preparedness includes strengthening our public health institutions, the Centers for Disease Control, other entities in the federal government, our laboratory infrastructure, our frontline health workers to be trained and ready, the trust between us and our people. Because when there's a crisis and you say, put a mask, if they don't believe you, they won't put a mask. You say, take this medicine, they won't believe you. So building that foundation of trust is also important, and that's what we do as part of preparedness. In addition to the more technical aspects of organizing ourselves to know that, are we ready when something starts? Do we have simulations, exercises that we can do to test where are the gaps, what have we learned? Strategic national stockpiles. When I was at the World Bank and pandemic hit, we put $6 billion on the table for countries. Your Excellency, many African countries reached out and said, how can we get test kits? How can we get ventilators? To my shock, the market stopped functioning. Cost of masks escalated. Ventilators were not available. Some big countries restricted access to their ventilators, and the market dysfunctioned. Even though we put money, but the money, we will buy ventilators for a country, and they will say it will be delivered in 6 months, and people were dying. Oxygen was not available. So there are strategic national stockpiles. Countries have them. How good is our strategic national stockpile? How do we construct it? When a disaster happens, it's not when it happens, like Dr. Tedros of the WHO says, you don't build a roof when it's raining. You build that roof before it starts to rain. So most countries have those strategic stockpiles. How do we build that as part of our effort to deal with outbreaks? Because pandemics don't occur in isolation. They start from a small outbreak, they expand to an epidemic, and if not controlled, they go to a pandemic. God forbid, if there's an influenza pandemic, fast-spreading infectious disease, are we ready? Those are important, very sobering questions that I know countries are asking themselves. And we ought to ask ourselves. And it's not only the executive, but the legislature and also the subnational units. It's also the professional groups, civil society, to ensure that as a country, as a matter of our own security, our own human security, we are prepared. So, Mr. President, I will stop here. Thank you.
Well, they're very distinguished colleagues. I'm sure you enjoyed the lecture. We actually invited him to answer questions, but he ended up lecturing. But Prof, I just want to put on record that I worked with you in my state when I was a governor, and we're able to stop the further spread of polio. And my state was among the first states that you declared polio-free in the country under my leadership as governor and under your advice and tutelage. I believe it is the view of the Senate that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu should be commended for going outside the shores of the country to bring back our country's best, to join in the renewed hope for all Nigerians. Is that the view of the Senate? Yeah. That this nominee, who we believe strongly will add value to this country's governance, should take leave of this Senate by taking a bow down. Those in support say aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Prof, thank you for coming.